Hey guys, I'm tardy today. So sorry. We had to meet with our collaborative teams this morning, and so we made some adjustments and talked about some issues that maybe we're having with online learning, and so I want to address some of those today in our video. I also want to cover today's material, tomorrow's material too. So this video is going to be long, which means that you can pause it, and I'll let you know when a good time to do that would be for today, and then start there again tomorrow when you're ready to do your English assignment for tomorrow. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me tell you what our goals are for today. We're determining the meaning of words and phrases. Again, this is our goal for the whole unit. We're really trying to learn how to figure out what words mean. So we do that by breaking words down into parts. We use context clues. How is that word used in the sentence? And does this word sound like another word that we know? Maybe one that we do know the meaning for, and that meaning can transfer onto this one. And we just sort of try it in the sentence and see if it works, if it makes sense. Sometimes we're wrong. It happens. Okay, so then we're going to analyze for structure and purpose. How does an author organize his ideas? How does he use rhetorical devices? And how do those, in turn, help him achieve his purpose? And there's usually three reasons or three purposes why people write, and that's to inform others, just to share information, to entertain them, make them laugh, make them cry, and to persuade them, to get them to see the world in a new way, or get them to do something. So that's what we're looking for as far as structure. And we're going to annotate. So again, if you're having issues with technology, if you can just watch this video, then you are annotating with me today. You're going to be watching me do it. So if that's all you have access to right now, okay, let's go with that. We're going to be circling words that are really important, that we see repeated, or that maybe we don't know and we feel like we need to in order to understand that paragraph. We're going to be underlining rhetorical devices, things like metaphors. We're going to learn about a new one today called the flashback. We're also going to be talking about things like character setting, conflict, elements of a story. So we're going to underline those things. We are going to make a few notes, trying to use our new tool today about maybe why that's important, or at least what device that is, being able to identify the device, because we're still learning those. Remember, we had that big poster up in our classroom. We had added some to it. So anyway, going to work on that. And then we're going to be working on writing summaries today, being able to summarize the story at the end, being able to summarize a whole section of text. So we're going to read part of it and say, okay, in this part, this happened. So that's the skill of summarizing that we're going to be doing. And again, summarizing is condensing it, making it short, but not losing its power, not losing any meaning, okay, but leaving out lots of details that traditionally we need to persuade us to support something. Okay, so that's what we're doing. Your options, if you're having issues with technology or things of that nature, let me kind of give you some advice. If you're doing paper, if you've got a packet, you're good to go. Just work through the packet, use the calendar on the front, and complete each of those assignments in that order. You shouldn't have any technological issues. You can watch these videos if you have access to them and work along with them there with your paper and your book. Of course, if you took a packet, it might have been because you didn't have an internet or a device. So that means maybe you're not even seeing the videos. All right. If you're doing this online and you're not having issues with Pearson, like you're able to get in there and everything uploads and all that, then just continue working that way. Use the link in Google Classroom to go do that assignment. And again, you're fine. Just keep rocking and rolling if that's working for you. You're more than welcome to watch the videos They may help you complete those assignments online, especially if you're struggling through the reading. If you don't have a parent at home to make you do your homework, coming and watching the video is maybe a form of making yourself read it, but not going to sleep because you're sitting there by yourself reading a book, and that might be a little boring. So I don't know. Maybe they'll help out. That's why they're created, is just some extra support ways. This is what I would, traditionally do in class. It would be more back and forth, like you would be talking to me more. But again, we're all learning in this situation. Comprehension questions today. I made a Google form. So if you're having issues with Pearson and you can't get those in there, you can just go to that Google form and answer them. That's a really good way to communicate with me too. If I haven't heard from you, I sent out emails. If I haven't heard from you, then I encourage you to email me, touch base with me, let me know what's going on. If you're turning assignments in, I'm usually writing a note back to you saying, good job, I got it. And that way you know that I have seen your communication with me. And that lets me know that you are working at home. You are making attempts. I know that these times are challenging, so I do not expect perfection. I do expect you to attempt to do some work for about 20 or 30 minutes in English. That's my expectation. So however we need to help you do that, if you can do 10 to 15 minutes, if your schedule is one where you can't do that, again, email me. Let me know what's going on with you. If you're having issues, we could do this with emails. I can adjust to help you out, but I can't help you out if it's a secret. So you got to email me. Cat's out of the bag. Okay, now that the business is over, let's get started with today's lesson. So I have some music for us because I like to appreciate music. And I know my choir teacher, Mr. Brown, loves that I'm adding this element in here. I'm sure he's going to send me an email immediately telling me how he loves how I'm doing this cross-curricular. Chris Brown. Okay, so if you don't want to listen to this part, you can zip through it. I highly suggest that you listen to it because, one, we're going to practice the skill I'm asking you to do today, and two, it's a cool song, man. Yes, always try to listen to all kinds of music. Be open-minded, like Gone and Back Again, the article that we read yesterday said about traveling. Apply that to music. So here we go. Sit back and enjoy this for a minute. This is a long, awesome journey. Sometimes I can hardly see my way. This is a long, awesome journey. Sometimes I can hardly see my way. Loving my good for nothing woman and being mistreated each and every day. But my day will be coming, and I won't have to cry no more. Yeah, my day will be coming, and I won't have to cry no more. I'll be loving my true love, and you know I will have to let you go.
long, lonesome journey. Nobody knows the trouble I see. Waiting for someone to love me, and I know that just can never be.
Fats Domino. So, some information about Fats Domino. He was born in New Orleans in 1928. He sold a bunch of music during his lifetime. He was an artist for 5 decades. So, again, an important figure in rock and roll. All right, so let's talk about what that song was about. Let me go away for a minute. So, looking at some of our details from the story, the word lonesome sort of indicates, maybe he might be sad. And it's a journey. Oh, that ties in with our topic. So he's traveling somewhere. He's something about a girl, always, isn't it? And he's sad about it. So, this word mistreated makes this sound like he's being very sad. His true love. So this indicates a lot of emotion, especially strong emotion. That was the wrong thing. So he really loves her a lot. Trouble makes us think that things aren't going as expected. And then, hold on, my son's interrupting me.
Can I order the DoorDash thing?
No, but thank you. I'll be in a minute. Shh, I gotta go. I'll make you some pancakes in a minute. Go away. Shh, I've got to read. Okay, sorry for that interruption. Okay, so anyway, trouble makes us think that, things aren't going as expected. And then this last, I know that just can never be. This makes us think, again, that he doesn't have a lot of hope for the future. He's just kind of resolved that it's just not going to work out. So, based on these words, what do you think this song is about? We could summarize it by saying he wants a woman to love him, but she just doesn't. Tiny Teacher's back. And we could say, if we were going to talk about one of the rhetorical devices that that Fats Domino used in his song to convey that, that very claim to you, is the metaphor. When he calls the life a long, lonesome journey, he's saying that it is like a road. A road's not perfect. It's bumpy. It's sometimes very hard to walk on or traverse. And so that's the metaphor. And again, he uses that metaphor to help us understand that his love for this woman has been a challenge, just like going down a rough road can be a challenge. Now, that can be transferred to the story today, which makes that a universal theme, something that everybody deals with. Life being a long road that we're traveling, and sometimes it's difficult. And think about our current situation. That's very true. It's difficult right now because we're having to adjust. And that's, a road is like that. You have to adjust. The tires do it for us. So we don't really feel it when we're driving. Walking, you feel it. Like, coming in my neighborhood is a big old hill. And I tried to walk in it one time as I thought, I'm fine. I'm so in shape. And I noticed I said once. I only did it once. So anyway, sometimes journeys are really hard. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today. So our lesson today needs to be on your mind as we read and annotate. You can do this on your own, with or without the video. It's totally up to you. Make sure you answer your comprehension questions either in person, in the Google form, or on paper. If you need to send me an email because you don't know what the comprehension questions are, do that. I'll send them to you on the email too. Any way that I can help you communicate with me what you figured out about the story is the desire right now. That's what you need to be doing. And it's not just with me, all teachers. Summarize. We're trying to answer the question, what can we learn on a journey? And so what does our character learn today on his journey? Be able to state that in your own words. That is summarizing. So we're going to use the author's ideas to summarize the lesson that we learn about a journey from reading this. And our lessons might be different. Some of them might be the same, but they might be different. Okay, this is also on the Google form if you're answering that, so you can answer there. Okay, so vocabulary, let's think of words that are really important right now, not just in our lives, but in today's story. So the first word I want you to think about is expectation. If we're looking at this word, we might see a word in here that looks familiar. Maybe we've heard it before, expect. So what does it mean to expect something? Like if someone's expecting a baby or you're expecting a package, that means that you are waiting on something. So again, when we add ION to a verb, we turn it into a noun. So an expectation is something we're waiting on. And if, for example, at school, we all have expectations of students. That's our example in our sentence today. We have expectations for all students at our HHS. So again, expectations are things that we're waiting on. We have positive connotations with this word. Connotations mean feelings, like how do we feel about this word when we use it? And a lot of times they make us feel like important. Like when people have expectations of you, that means that they're trusting that you're going to be able to perform. So that's a compliment. But sometimes we have some negative connotations with the word expectation because they can be stressful. They can be high. They can make they can be demanding, and so sometimes expectations, that word kind of frightens us. But you're tough. You can handle it. Okay, so a strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. So that's what expectations are. The next word, nostalgia. This is one of my favorite words. It's kind of a sad word, though. Here's our example. Every time I hear that song by Dan Fogelberg, I feel nostalgic. So if you notice, this word ends in IC, whereas our word ends in IA. This is just changing how we use them in the sentence. So nostalgia is a noun. Feeling nostalgic is, an adjective. So just changing those in, that's called a suffix, those things at the end there. When we change them, it changes the part of speech, like how we can use that word in the sentence. And then they're all related. So like if you know the definition of nostalgia, then if you saw nostalgic, you would say, oh, I know that. So if you don't know the Dan Fogelberg songs, then I highly suggest you Google that after you watch this video today. And again, appreciate some music from a different era. You probably ought to listen to Old Lang Syne. It's really sad. Makes me cry every time. All right, so nostalgia is a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or a place with happy personal associations. So nostalgia and expectation have a lot to do with us right now. The world has a lot of expectations of us. The school has expectations of us, and we have to perform. Nostalgia, maybe what we're feeling for school right now. I know a lot of y'all are very social. I see you in class. I'm the one that's telling you to quit talking to your friends. So I know we miss each other. I know, though, that your generation is very connected in technology. So I feel like y'all are doing okay in that regard. But I know we miss school. The steady schedule of school probably helps a lot of us feel comfortable, and we may miss that. So nostalgia is how you're feeling right now if you're missing school. I feel a lot of nostalgia because I'm 49 and I've lived forever. And so, there's 5 decades of memories that I miss. I miss my dad. I miss my grandparents. And so there'll be certain times where I feel this too. These ideas are echoed in our story today. Our story is called The Return. It is by a man named Guji Wa Tiango. I'm probably mutilating his poor name with my southern accent. But, what do we know about him, and how does his background help us understand his feelings or his tone about the story that we're going to read today? He was born in Kenya. He lived through a rebellion. And a rebellion, again, is when people rise up against their government. Sometimes they're violent. Sometimes they're not. That's not true. Most of the time they're violent. So he wrote a book about the conditions under the dictatorship of Kenya and ended up in jail in 1977. He was released, and then, they tried to arrest him again. So he came to the United States. And the story that we're reading today takes place in Kenya. And it is about a young man who's coming home after he's been imprisoned by the government. So again, a personal experience that he lived through, because in 1952 there was an uprising and over 20,000 people were imprisoned by the government. So, and I got all this information from the Pearson material, which we'll hear again in just a minute. If you don't know where Kenya is in the world, here is the world, right? So we're kind of over here on this side. And then this is Africa, and Kenya is right down here. And it looks like it's a pretty large area. I mean, not big like the United States, but large for countries in Africa. And I could be wrong, totally wrong. Again, we're learning together, guys. So anyway, this is where it is. Notice the different terrain. That's what different colors on a map mean. That's always cool to figure out. Okay, so let's go to our story. We're going to listen to the first half of the story. I'm going to scroll through. Please note what's highlighted, what material is highlighted. This is annotating. We'll go back over it and talk before we do the second half. So here we go.
Short story. Background. The British colonial government controlled Kenya, the setting of this story, from the late 19th century until 1963. In 1952, this government declared a state of emergency in order to violently suppress the Mau Mau Rebellion, an anti-British uprising by the Gikuyu ethnic group. Over 20,000 Gikuyu were imprisoned by the government, and over 10,000 people lost their lives during the fighting. About the author. Guji Wa Tiango, born 1938, was born in Kenya, and as a young boy lived through the Mau Mau Rebellion. His first play, The Black Hermit, was a major success. His unsparing but accurate account of life in the dictatorship of post-colonial Kenya, Petals of Blood, landed him in prison in 1977. After his release, the government reissued a warrant for his arrest. Guji chose exile instead and fled to the United States. Guji has received numerous honors and taught at a number of major universities. The Return, by Guji Wa Tiango. The road was long. Whenever he took a step forward, little clouds of dust rose, whirled angrily behind him, and then slowly settled again. But a thin train of dust was left in the air, moving like smoke. He walked on, however, unmindful of the dust and ground under his feet. Yet with every step he seemed more and more conscious of the hardness and apparent animosity of the road. Not that he looked down. On the contrary, he looked straight ahead, as if he would, any time now, see a familiar object that would hail him as a friend and tell him that he was near home. But the road stretched on. He made quick, springing steps, his left hand dangling freely by the side of his once white coat, now torn and worn out. His right hand, bent at the elbow, held onto a string tied to a small bundle on his slightly drooping back. The bundle, well wrapped with a cotton cloth that had once been printed with red flowers, now faded out, swung from side to side in harmony with the rhythm of his steps. The bundle held the bitterness and hardships of the years spent in detention camps. Now and then he looked at the sun on its homeward journey, Sometimes he darted quick side glances at the small hedged strips of land, which with their sickly-looking crops, maize, beans, and peas, appeared much as everything else did, unfriendly. The whole country was dull and seemed weary. To Kamau, this was nothing new. He remembered that even before the Mau Mau emergency, the overtilled Gikuyu holdings wore haggard looks in contrast to the sprawling green fields in the settled area. A path branched to the left. He hesitated for a moment and then made up his mind. For the first time, his eyes brightened a little as he went along the path that would take him down the valley and then to the village. At last, home was near. And with that realization, the faraway look of a weary traveler seemed to desert him for a while. The valley and the vegetation along it were in deep contrast to the surrounding country. For here green bush and trees thrived. This could only mean one thing. Honia River still flowed. He quickened his steps as if he could scarcely believe this to be true till he had actually set his eyes on the river. It was there. It still flowed. Honia, where so often he had taken a bath, plunging stark naked into its cool living water, warmed his heart as he watched its serpentine movement around the rocks and heard its slight murmurs. A painful exhilaration passed all over him, and for a moment he longed for those days. He sighed. Perhaps the river would not recognize in his hardened features that same boy to whom the riverside world had meant everything. Yet as he approached Honia, he felt more akin to it than he had felt to anything else since his release. A group of women were drawing water. He was excited, for he could recognize one or two from his ridge. There was the middle-aged Wanjiku, whose deaf son had been killed by the security forces just before he himself was arrested. She had always been a darling of the village, having a smile for everyone and food for all. Would they receive him? Would they give him a hero's welcome? He thought so. Had he not always been a favorite all along the ridge? And had he not fought for the land? He wanted to run and shout, "Here I am, I have come back to you." But he desisted. He was a man. "Is it well with you?" a few voices responded. The other women, with tired and worn features, looked at him mutely, as if his greeting was of no consequence. Why, had he been so long in the camp? His spirits were damped as he feebly asked, "Do you not remember me?" Again they looked at him. They stared at him with cold, hard looks. Like everything else, they seemed to be deliberately refusing to know or own him. It was Wanjiku who at last recognized him. But there was neither warmth nor enthusiasm in her voice as she said, "Oh, is it you, Kamau? We thought you—" She did not continue. Only now he noticed something else. Surprise? Fear? He could not tell. He saw their quick glances dart at him, and he knew for certain that a secret from which he was excluded bound them together. Perhaps I am no longer one of them, he bitterly reflected. But they told him of the new village. The old village of scattered huts spread thinly over the ridge was no more. He left them, feeling embittered and cheated. The old village had not even waited for him, and suddenly he felt a strong nostalgia for his old home, friends, and surroundings. He thought of his father, mother, and he dared not think about her. But for all that, Muthoni, just as she had been in the old days, came back to his mind. His heart beat faster. He felt desire, and a warmth thrilled through him. He quickened his step. He forgot the village women as he remembered his wife. He had stayed with her for a mere 2 weeks. Then he had been swept away by the colonial forces. Like many others, he had been hurriedly screened and then taken to detention without trial. And all that time he had thought of nothing but the village and his beautiful woman.
Okay, so I think that is where we're going to stop for a minute, and then let's go back and look at some things. So, hello, I'm back. All right, so I touched my face. So, paragraph number 1, in the beginning of a story, If y'all will remember, we had that pyramid. I know y'all remember this. Surely I have a marker around here somewhere. Still setting up shop outside because it's so loud at my house. Well, you heard earlier in the video. They talk constantly. Okay, so I know y'all remember this. This was like our structure. And so, down here, ooh, whoa, this is fun. Ooh, is it here or here? In the beginning of the story, we get things like information about the character, like who's in it. We get information about where is it and when is it, the setting, like what's going on and who's in here, what's going on in here. And then we kind of start to get hints about a conflict. So those are the things that we're going to be looking for right now. Now, once we know what that conflict is, then rising up is where we complicate that conflict. Like the character is challenged. If they just accomplished it, then that wouldn't be a story. That would be like, hey, I went to the store and I got a banana. Nobody cares. But if I go to the store and while I'm getting a banana, a 97-year-old woman starts hurling apples at my face, well, now we've got a story. So that's the rise. I don't even know. That's the rising action that moves the story forward, and it's usually attempts for a character to achieve their goal, but they don't. So here, notice when I come I came in coming from the top. Okay, so here, this is the climax. This is where the story turns, like something else happens. The character's no longer failing. He's going to go ahead and go forward. In a Shakespearean tragedy, he dies. In other stories, the turning point means the character goes on and maybe he's changed and he turns into a better person. That's this part down here, this wrapping it up. I'm even on the same side. Wrapping it up, making sure all of our final details are addressed. And we wrap the story up nice and neat. Then down here at the resolution, this is where our character reflects on the lesson that he learned. This is that universal theme. It kind of hints at the theme that most of us struggle with. Like the theme would be love, but in this particular topic, maybe the dangers of love, as far as what happens when it ends, what happens to you when it's over. So a more specific thing about love is sort of our lesson that we learn and the theme of the story. The topic would be love, but the theme would be love is very challenging and hard. I hope I explained that right. And I'm so sorry I used this. This was a terrible idea. Note for the future. Okay, so hope I didn't just confuse you. Here we go. All right, so here in our first paragraph, we have, with every step, he seemed more and more conscious of the hardness and apparent animosity of the road. Apparent animosity, this is a great use of alliteration where the letters, are of each word begin with the same sound, has sort of a musical quality, and it draws our attention to those two words. Apparent animosity. Animosity is a negative word. Normally in class, I would have y'all talk to each other and try to figure out what that word means, but we're not, so I'm just going to tell you. Animosity is when we have really bad feelings towards something. And so he's saying here that the animosity of the road, it's an unfriendly road, okay? Kind of sounds like Fats Domino talking about his long, lonely journey. So maybe there's some crossover here between our opening song and what we're reading in our story. Second paragraph, and so obviously our setting is he's on a road, right? Our character is this guy, right? It's this guy. And he is heading home. Like we see that right here. So that's all the information we need to kind of jump right in this story. That's that thing called exposition. Okay. This is an interesting one right here. Let's talk about something called symbolism. So authors don't put things in the story. They don't, nothing's there by accident. So this bundle that he's talking about, a bundle is like a small package. And, he has this bundle, and it held the bitterness and hardships of the years spent in detention camps. So here's our first clue that he has been in a detention camp. That's, a detention camp, kind of negative connotations with that. Things would not have been pleasant for him. Now and then he looked at the sun on its homeward journey. So again, he's carrying with him bitterness and hardship of the years spent. This is metaphorical. It represents all of the terrible parts of being in that detention camp. This would be something like emotional weight. When we carry around stress, it's heavy. It is almost like carrying another backpack. And so he's trying to express that here. The literal image is of him carrying a bag, sort of like our picture from yesterday where the guy was on the road with a bag. And so, we kind of have that image of him carrying this bundle, this little sack home. But even deeper than that, I think later, as we read the story, we'll start to maybe see that this bundle is probably symbolic. He's carrying bitterness and hardship. That's heavy. So we'll watch that as we continue down through the story. The Mau Mau emergency. This is an allusion. This is an allusion to an event that happened in Kenya. And so he's talking about how he lived through that. And during that time, the Gikuyu, so sorry to this culture for my southern accent, were arrested and imprisoned. And this character was one of those who was arrested. Okay. And so we're learning about, he's reflecting on his experience as he's walking home. Okay. Now we're starting to see the country too. So there's a lot of imagery in here, and he's painting a picture for us. And this is important because when I would imagine and we can kind of think about that right now, when you can't go out, when you can't go anywhere, you start to remember places that are important to you and reflect on it. So if you were in prison, you would want to remember your home, because that would probably be a place where you had comfortable feelings, even if it was just your room, you might reflect on that. So those details, this imagery throughout here helps us see why his home was so important to him. These are details that reflect things about the character, and the character is remembering them. So when he remembers them, that is saying something about who he is, and like what's important to him shows us what he values. Again, all details about who this character is. And are we like that? Like, can we identify with that character? Do you have those same things that are important to you? For example, in this character, he talks about the river. Not an accident, not even a little. So this river is clearly an important part of his childhood. Notice how long he talks about it. And he talks about he was so excited that it still flows. He couldn't believe his eyes, but there it was. He could remember bathing in this when he was a child. He has very warm feelings. He even says that warmed his heart as he watched its serpentine movement. So do you notice a word here? Like, do you see a word that maybe you recognize? Possibly serpent. And we know a serpent is a snake. So serpentine would be something like a snake. Anytime we add that ine on the end of it, we mean it's like that. So this is like a snake. And rivers are. They have a body like a snake, kind of move like a snake. Quick. I don't like snakes. So anyway, but I do like rivers. So anyway, he's talking about the river. He loves the river. So I feel like the river's important in this story. He's not mentioning it here at the beginning. He's not mentioning this road here at the beginning on accident. So these are going to play an important role in the story as we progress. Okay, so again, he's feeling that nostalgia. when he used to play in the river, he sighed. Perhaps the river would not recognize his hardened features, like maybe it wouldn't see the person he's turned into from being in prison, indicating that prison changed him and made him maybe more of a negative person, or at least not more aware of how life can be hard on people. Okay, so he then approaches these women. He's so excited, y'all. This is where the word expectation comes in. He had this expectation that they were going to be so excited to see him. Like, he was the village favorite kid. They loved him. He says so right down here. He's like, had I not always been the favorite? Like, hello, I'm back. He figured people had been missing him. And he'd been gone, and so he'd been gone so long, and he thought for sure everybody was going to be so excited to see him. He had an expectation that in this paragraph tells us it was not met. So, he didn't get the welcome that he thought he was going to get. So the woman asks, how he is, and they end up in an exchange where they really realize who he is. And then this is significant. Her dialogue down here, what she says, is how the author indicates or builds suspense. Like, we want to know now too. So here, right when she says, "Oh, is it you, Kemu? We thought you," and then she cuts off. So this leaves us hanging, literally. Look, there's even a dash there. It totally leaves us hanging. So we don't know. What? And he says he could not tell. He saw their quick glances dart at him. So when people are talking about you and you walk up and then they all quit and they all look at each other. Or something's happened and you don't know and they know you don't know. And so they're all looking at each other like, oh my God, did he hear us? That's what's going on here. And, he knew for certain that there was a secret. So he knew something was up, something had changed, and had influenced why his reception, him being welcomed back, was not what he thought it should be. Okay, now they told him of the new village. So the word new, indicates that the village has changed. Okay, so we have a lot of changing going on here. This is probably true too for him. In the beginning of the story, he does. He says, "I hope the river recognizes me because I've changed. The village has changed." So this indicates that he was gone a significant amount of time. And because he was gone for so long, a lot has happened. All right, and then he feels the nostalgia for his home and friends. Again, a time in his life when he was happy. He was not happy in the detention center. Remember, he has the bundle of bitterness that he's carrying from there. But here, he had all these really good memories. It's what he thought of. It's what helped him get through being in the detention center. And he introduces that here, that he had thought about them the whole time, and he dared not think about her. So here we have the introduction of her. There's always a woman in that. Just kidding. So anyway, he really loves her, and her name is Muthoni, and I hope I'm saying that right. And they were married. That was his wife. They had not been married for long. They'd only been married for 2 weeks. And then he had been arrested and swept out of there. And he had been taken to detention without a trial. Guys, we just studied civil and human rights. Is this okay? Does this not go against your rights as a person? That people can't just say, "Oh, you've committed a crime, we're arresting you." You have to, somebody else has to agree, primarily a judge, that you did in fact break the law. So ties, connections to our old unit, the fact that they're having a rebellion probably indicates that they were struggling with civil rights. So again, a lot of connections. Civil rights is also a journey. So all that time had nothing that he was there. All he thought about was her. Okay. Now, we're fixing to pick back up here at paragraph 8. And notice the green is significant. We shift here. And I want you to think about, how do we shift? Like, what are we shifting to?
They had talked of nothing but their homes. One day he was working next to another detainee from Moronga. Suddenly the detainee, Nairohe, stopped breaking stones. He sighed heavily. His worn-out eyes had a faraway look. "What's wrong, man? What's the matter with you?" Kamau asked. "It is my wife. I left her expecting a baby. I have no idea what has happened to her." Another detainee put in, "For me, I left my woman with a baby. She had just been delivered. We were all happy, but on the same day I was arrested." And so they went on. All of them longed for one day, the day of their return home. Then life would begin anew. Kamau himself had left his wife without a child. He had not even finished paying the bride price. But now he would go, seek work in Nairobi, and pay off the remainder to Muthoni's parents. Life would indeed begin anew. They would have a son and bring him up in their own home. With these prospects before his eyes, he quickened his steps. He wanted to run, no, fly, to hasten his return. He was now nearing the top of the hill. He wished he could suddenly meet his brothers and sisters. Would they ask him questions? He would, at any rate, not tell them all. The beating, the screening, and the work on roads and in quarries, with an askari always nearby ready to kick him if he relaxed. Yes, he had suffered many humiliations, and he had not resisted. Was there any need? But his soul and all the vigor of his manhood had rebelled and bled with rage and bitterness. One day these Wazungu would go. One day his people would be free. Then, he did not know what he would do. However, he bitterly assured himself no one would ever flout his manhood again. He mounted the hill and then stopped. The whole plain lay below. The new village was before him. Rows and rows of compact mud huts, crouching on the plain.
Okay, sorry. I let that go a little far. If you want to stop after I get done with paragraph 15, then you could definitely stop there and pick up with this again tomorrow. But let's look at what's going on real quick with 8 through 15. Notice the shift here. We go from talking about he's remembering his beautiful mother right here, or the beautiful mother. He's remembering his beautiful wife right here. And then we have this shift. The others had been like him. So the others, who are the others? So we're probably asking ourselves that. They had not talked, or they had talked of nothing but their homes. One day he was working next to another detainee. Here's our clue that he has flashback. This is called a flashback. This is when we're trying to remember something and we're trying to maybe share that memory with our audience. That's called a flashback. So whenever we go back to something that happened before the actual events of the story, that's called a flashback. So that's what we have here. He's flashing back to what life was like as a detainee. And as we can see, it was terrible. They all had worn out eyes. Again, a specific detail that would indicate we could infer that they were tired and exhausted. We could infer from these details down here where they talk about the beating, the screening, and the work on the roads and in the quarries, with the askari always nearby, ready to kick him if he relaxed. So all those details indicate this was a very challenging, physically challenging existence in the detention camp. But again, they're all remembering home, which is sort of significant. It sounds like that this was what gave them hope, was coming home. The memories of that childhood are really important because it helped them get out of this situation. So again, rage and bitterness were experienced while they were here. So they're not always, there are going to be side effects from being in this camp that we're going to have to deal with. And a lot of these really angry feelings are some of them. the value of memories is conveyed in these paragraphs, because that's the purpose of those memories, were to give him hope that there would be more one day. And so he would hang on and get out of there. Okay, so if this is a good time for you, you need to bow out and you want to watch the rest of the video tomorrow and then answer your questions and write your journal entry for tomorrow. You may do so. I would stop, here, and then I would pick back up tomorrow. And so here's where I say ciao, adieu, adios, sayonara, arrivederci, au revoir, goodbye. So I encourage you to try saying hello and goodbye in new languages. So now you would be back. So hello, bonjour, shalom, hola, aloha. I love that aloha is hello and goodbye. It's a twofer. How convenient. Way to go, Hawaii. All right, so if you're coming back, then we're starting up with paragraph 16. And in paragraph 16, that's the end of the flashback. So again, and how do I know that? Because it says he mounted the hill and then stopped. So we're back to traveling. So this again is where we know that the flashback has stopped and now we've moved back to the present, when the story is taking place. Notice the detail following that is this new village before him. Again, new. It's changed from when he was there last. Rows and rows of compact huts. Compact means like they're all very close together. What does that look like? What would this village look like? Does it look like our city? Does it look like something else? And so we've got a lot of really cool imagery in this part where we're fixing to listen to what happens when he gets back into the village. And I'm just going to let this roll for a little while. And in fact, I'm just probably going to let the whole, I don't know. We'll see. I may stop. I don't know. I'm so unpredictable. Oh, and ridiculous. Here we go.
The vanishing sun. Dark blue smoke curled upward from various huts to form a dark mist that hovered over the village. Beyond, the deep blood-red sinking sun sent out finger-like streaks of light that thinned outward and mingled with the gray mist shrouding the distant hills. In the village, he moved from street to street, meeting new faces. He inquired. He found his home. He stopped at the entrance to the yard and breathed hard and full. This was the moment of his return home. His father sat huddled up on a three-legged stool. He was now very aged, and Kamau pitied the old man. But he had been spared. Yes, spared to see his son's return. Father! The old man did not answer. He just looked at Kamau with strange, vacant eyes. Kamau was impatient. He felt annoyed and irritated. Did he not see him? Would he behave like the women Kamau had met by the river? In the street, naked and half-naked children were playing, throwing dust at one another. The sun had already set, and it looked as if there would be moonlight. Father, don't you remember me? Hope was sinking in him. He felt tired. Then he saw his father suddenly start and tremble like a leaf. He saw him stare with unbelieving eyes. Fear was discernible in those eyes. His mother came, and his brothers too. They crowded around him. His aged mother clung to him and sobbed hard. I knew my son would come. I knew he was not dead. Why? Who told you I was dead? That Karanja, son of Nyogu. And then Kamau understood. He understood his trembling father. He understood the women at the river. But one thing puzzled him. He had never been in the same detention camp with Karanja. Anyway, he had come back. He wanted now to see Mathoni. Why had she not come out? He wanted to shout, I have come, Mathoni. I am here. He looked around. His mother understood him. She quickly darted a glance at her man and then simply said, Mathoni went away. Kamau felt something cold settle in his stomach. He looked at the village huts and the dullness of the land. He wanted to ask many questions, but he dared not. He could not yet believe that Mathone had gone, but he knew by the look of the women at the river, by the look of his parents, that she was gone. She was a good daughter to us, his mother was explaining. She waited for you and patiently bore all the ills of the land. Then Karanja came and said that you were dead. Your father believed him. She believed him too, and keened for a month. Karanja constantly paid us visits. He was of your Rika, you know. Then she got a child. We could have kept her. But where's the land? Where's the food? Ever since land consolidation, our last security was taken away. We let Karanja go with her. Other women have done worse, gone to town. Only the infirm and the old have been left here. He was not listening. The coldness in his stomach slowly changed to bitterness. He felt bitter against all the people, including his father and mother. They had betrayed him. They had leagued against him, and Karanja had always been his rival. 5 years was admittedly not a short time, but why did she go? Why did they allow her to go? He wanted to speak. Yes, speak and denounce everything. The women by the river, the village, and the people who dwelled there. But he could not. This bitter thing was choking him. You gave my own away, he whispered. Listen, child. The big yellow moon dominated the horizon. He hurried away, bitter and blind, and only stopped when he came to the Honya River. And standing at the bank, he saw not the river, but his hopes dashed from the ground instead. The river moved swiftly, making ceaseless, monotonous murmurs. In the forest, the crickets and other insects kept up an incessant buzz. And above, the moon shone bright. He tried to remove his coat, and the small bundle he had held onto so firmly fell. It rolled down the bank, and before Kamau knew what was happening, it was floating swiftly down the river. For a time he was shocked and wanted to retrieve it. What would he show his... Oh, had he forgotten so soon? His wife had gone. And the little things that had so strangely reminded him of her and that he had guarded all those years had gone. He did not know why, but somehow he felt relieved. Thoughts of drowning himself dispersed. He began to put on his coat, murmuring to himself, why should she have waited for me? Why should all the changes have waited for my return?
Real expecting any of that. Oh my god! So, this is why it's so cool to read stories, especially when you can't go out. You can just go out in your brain and live this story in Kenya today with me. So, here we go. All right, so we're starting back with with paragraph 16. He's on the hill, kind of assessing everything before he walks down there. Again, this is a new village. The word new is hinting to us that things have changed in the village since he's been there. We have this imagery of what the village looks like. So we've got I'm sorry, I'm looking at emails too. Okay. So the dark blue smoke curling up from the huts. And then this is one of the best lines. Beyond the deep blood red sinking sun sent out finger-like streaks of light that thinned outward and mingled with the gray mist shrouding the distant hills. That is an amazing sentence. The images that it invokes in your brain are just really vivid to me. In fact, I found some. So here is what the village would look like to me. Of course, there would be more of these huts because it says they're compact. That's the detail from the text. And this is the image that kind of pops up in my head is him kind of coming home. Again, he's not been well received. He doesn't have a whole lot of people who are welcoming him. And he's wondering, he's like, it's me, your homie, I'm back. And nobody, he's like excited. So he's very curious about why is that? And so this is the image that's in my head that, pops up as I read these details. When I read the blood orange, red streak, those details, this is the color that comes to mind. He's on the edge of the water and the sun is setting. And so it does almost look, like a blood red type color. So this is the image that comes into my mind when I'm reading those words in paragraph 16, where it says, and let me find what exactly they are. The blood red sinking sun. So this is what that looks like to me. And then when he mentions the finger-like streaks of light that thinned outward and mingled with the gray mist shrouding in the distant hills. I don't have any distant hills here, but there are those finger-like streaks that he's talking about. So this is the picture that should be in our head when we read those words. And that's what he wants. He wants us to appreciate the beauty that is surrounding our character right now. The very thing that gave him inspiration while he was in that detention center is surrounding him, almost hugging him right now. And he's, very scared because he doesn't understand why nobody's greeting him and things have changed. So he's kind of frightened. So it's good that he can look around him and see these things that are just like home. All right. Now, this was the moment of his return. Again, this is like suspense, and we want to see what happens. The first reaction was not what we expected. He expected those women to recognize him, and they did not. Now we're meeting the dad. Notice the details here. Strange, vacant eyes. Camus was feeling impatient and annoyed and irritated. These details indicate to us that his dad really didn't see him. He asked this question, did he not see me? I mean, so this, we can infer that they don't know him. Either they have forgotten him or, something's going on. So in the streets, we've got these kids playing with dust. So maybe this is a village where there's not a lot of, again, this is a cultural difference. We're in Kenya, so a village probably looks very different than a town. And so, yeah, you would have kids playing out in the dirt because there aren't any roads or basketball courts maybe for them to go play in. So anyway, he's asking if his father remembers him, and notice he's got this sinking and tired feeling. And again, this is the second reaction that seems to be on the negative side. His father starts to tremble. So this may indicate something bad has happened. He just stared, unbelieving. This is a hint, unbelieving. They can't believe it's him. It's almost like they're doubting themselves. And they could see that there was fear in his eyes too. Again, these are hints that something, like they're not happy to see him, which is what they should have been. So this is all very strange for us. His family comes and all clings around to him finally, and they're sad. But again, this line, I knew he was not dead. This clues us in. They thought he was dead. Like they're not believing their eyes because they didn't know they had no idea. They thought he had died. And, he's like, why did you think I had died? And they said, the son of Karanja. Yeah. Uh-huh. And who is this? So we get a new character, and apparently this guy took it upon himself to move in on Camus' wife. Yikes. Taking advantage of him being in the detention center. And we get all these details here. He doesn't understand why Karanja would tell them that he's dead because they were never in the same detention center. So we get that detail here. Like he really wouldn't have had that knowledge. And, then he says, where's my wife? And that's when it kind of starts to dawn on him, I see now why you told my family I was dead. Because he took his wife. And the family, of course, feels terrible about this. And when, Camus finds this out, it says he has a cold settle in his stomach. There's a dullness now to the land. All of the land that he described that sounded so pretty in the beginning now is not pretty at all. And he's feeling really bad. And he immediately takes off and runs out. Or no, I mean, he starts to understand why the women at the river were acting so weird now too, because they knew the secret. Remember, they mentioned a secret that was foreshadowing. This is the big secret. Then the family hovers around him. They're explaining to him why this happened. They said, she was good. She waited for you. She patiently bore all the ills of the land. So, I mean, this gives us information that she wasn't trying to abandon him. Like, she was waiting for him. But Karanja kept coming around and saying that Camus was dead. And even Camus' father believed him. So he was very convincing. She keened, which means she mourned. She was sad and cried. And he kept visiting. And so, then there's this big bomb. She got a child. So now, in her defense, she thought he was dead. She was trying to provide for herself. If you notice, she had to live with Camus' family. So this might indicate that women had to have a family to survive. And so that's what she's thinking of, especially if she's got a baby. She's trying to survive. So that could be why she went off with Karanja. So anyway, they could not afford to keep her. And so that's why they let her go with him. Things could have been worse. She could have gone to town, meaning maybe even taken a much worse path than the one that she was in. And then this line here, only the infirm and the old have been left here. So again, this whole community has changed. It's not what he remembers. It wasn't the town that got him through the detention center. He is changing here. He came, he had that expectation that everybody was going to be glad to see him. He is sorely disappointed. So now he's changed. He's angry. He feels betrayed. And so he runs out. And this is where we find out how long he was gone. 5 years was admittedly not a short time. So we know that he was gone for 5 years. That's a long time to wait on somebody, especially if people have told you that they're dead. You wouldn't keep waiting for someone that you thought had passed away. And so again, this is a really long time. And he knows that, and he's questioning, but he's feeling a lot of pain here. It says, yes, speak and denounce everything. Denounce means to speak poorly about someone or to put them down, and that's what he's doing now. He wanted to say, I hate this town, but he couldn't. The bitter thing was choking him, and the bitter thing is the truth of the situation. So that's what we're going to get to down here. He hurried away, and guess where he went? The river. Remember, we mentioned the river in the beginning. The river's important here. It has some symbolic meaning, just like that little bundle of bitterness that he has. And notice how these two are like coming together here at the end of the story. So we've got him being upset. His expectations are dashed. He goes to the river, the very place that he remembers so intimately as a child. And he has this little bundle of memories, things from the detention camp that were special to him. It's probably the only stuff he had. And so all of that is all culminating right here. And so he's standing at the bank. And again, we're in those falling action moments. The climax would have been when he no longer expected them to welcome him back. That's when our character changed. Now he's angry because he found out the truth. So he's changed. And he goes to the river. And then this is an awesome final paragraph. It's a beautiful way to end a story. He's standing at the bank. of the river. He's so mad. His hopes dashed on the ground instead. And so instead of taking in the beauty that's surrounding him, the very thing that he missed while he was gone, he's concentrating on all the negative stuff. The river moved swiftly, making ceaseless, monotonous murmurs. There's that alliteration again. In the forest, the crickets and other insects kept up an incessant buzz. These details about nature are important. Notice nothing stops the monotonous murmur of the river. Nothing stops the incessant buzz of the bugs. Life goes on. It doesn't matter what is going on in the world. Life goes on. And he's getting to see that firsthand as he's standing there at the river, but he's not really recognizing it. He tried to remove his coat, and the small bundle he had held onto so firmly fell. It rolled down the bank, and before Camus knew what was happening, it was floating swiftly down the river. For a time, he was shocked, and he wanted to retrieve it. What would he show his... Oh, he had forgotten so soon. His wife had gone. So the things in that bag, he was going to share with his wife when he got back. And again, notice the significance of losing the bundle, losing the weight. You know, it was a bag of bitterness because it reminded him of that detention camp. And so to lose it is kind of important. It's symbolic as we make our way through this paragraph. And he doesn't have anyone to show it now to anyway. His wife is not there. And the little things that had so strangely reminded him of her and that he had guarded all those years had gone. But guys, do you kind of think that maybe they served their purpose? Like they got him through the detention camp, and maybe that was what they were there. You know, maybe that was the purpose of those memories. Maybe that was her purpose, was to keep him alive. He did not know why, but he somehow felt relieved. Again, losing that bag to the river was probably like letting go. You know, and now I don't have to think about that anymore. You know, I can kind of let it go. Thoughts of drowning himself dispersed. So again, he was feeling what we call despair, and you know, like there was really no hope. But he began to put his coat back on, murmuring to himself, "Why should she have waited for me? Why should all the changes that have waited for my, or why should all the changes have waited for my return?" And this has a lot to do with the river. You know, they say, there's a saying that says you never step in the same river twice. And it's true because the water's constantly moving. It's always a new river. And I think that's our lesson here at the end, especially based on this last line. Why would life have stopped because of my situation? And clearly he's answering his own question. It wouldn't. So he's forgiving himself, maybe. He's not necessarily happy or, you know, but he's okay with how things have ended. You know, he understands that those were lessons. And that's what we're talking about today. So let's go back here. Thinking about that river, again, you know, it moves constantly. So anytime you step in, this is all new water. And water has a cleansing effect too. And so maybe that is why the river was such a symbolic part of the story, because it allowed him to get rid of the bad things and start over. So, okay, if you are in Google Classroom, there's Ashton Burton saying, "Hey, Ashton, you made it to the video." Okay, so here I left you some notes. Let me tell you something about the Google Classroom. Go by the dates here. So like March 18th, read everything for March 18th. That will be the work and any notes I have for you about that day, that AMI day assignment. Today, I left you a note about how I had a meeting this morning, so my stuff would be late. I posted your assignment from Pearson if you're struggling with this. Again, maybe watch the videos or send me an email. If you're looking where to find how to answer the questions in Pearson, you're going to go over here to make meaning. You're going to go down to comprehension check. And you're going to click where it says notebook. And you're going to type your answers in there. Okay? Right here. You're just going to type away. And that's where you're going to answer your questions. Okay? So do that. Or if you don't have access to Pearson material, if it's acting bad for you, then you can download this PDF. This is the whole unit. I mean, you'll have to scroll through to find the pieces, but it's also got the questions in there. That might be an option. And then you can just go answer the questions in this Google form. So again, you can answer in the Pearson over here where I showed you where it says make meaning. You can answer in this Google form. Or if you're working in a book, you can answer in the book. You can answer on an email and send me the email. So that's it for today. It's been awesome talking to you. Again, hopefully you split this video up into 2 segments. Tomorrow, you're going to be doing a writing assignment. You're going to be writing a journal entry. So I will do a short video for you tomorrow going over how to complete that assignment. It will be called AMI Day 4. So that's what we'll be doing tomorrow, and I'll just kind of go over the writing. If you wanted to listen to the rest of this video about the story, you could have. So stay safe. See you tomorrow.